This segment of DelmarvaLife is sponsored by For All Seasons Behavioral Health and Rape Crisis Center.
Think about this. If you were to break a bone in your body and ignore it, you're no doubt going to have a lot of pain and a lot of negative impacts on the rest of your body. It just makes sense then that the same thing goes for any trauma in your life that you've never addressed. But there are resources that can help you through that, so you can live the most productive life possible. Here to explain is the president and CEO of For All Seasons, Beth Ann Dorman. Beth, thanks for being here this afternoon.
Thank you.
So what we are talking about is something called intergenerational trauma. What is it and why is it important to address?
Yeah, so intergenerational trauma is really about understanding that when traumas happen in family systems, there is an impact that our generations beyond where the trauma happened can really start to show up and shape how we have parented our children, how we show up in our own family system. And it really is an important piece, as you say, to address, because left unaddressed, there can be years of ongoing trauma, the way that we show up, and impacts like depression and anxiety start to show up in our family system differently.
And yeah, that was my next question. What happens when you don't deal with it? Does it just snowball?
It does snowball, and it maybe will move someone into fear. It might move someone into depression or anxiety. It might change how we parent as our children are growing up. You know, if we've experienced a trauma and it has really shaped how we see the world, it has shaped how we interact with people, we may be passing that on unknowingly to our children. And these family systems that we really have to pay attention to, you know, we've all experienced trauma. You and I can sit and say, yes, intergenerational trauma is happening in our families, because no one's life is untouched by trauma. And most importantly, as we look at intergenerational trauma, we're moving into a time where we want to be able to break that cycle so that we can start to show up differently for the younger generations.
So how does this tie into what For All Seasons already does to treat trauma?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are the trauma center for the Shore, and so we are working with things like sexual assault, mental illness, trauma. We all have experienced it. It might be an arson, or it might be the death of a loved one. It might be an incarceration of a parent. All of these things start to show up as trauma. We talk a lot about adverse childhood experiences. It's called ACEs. And so in the conversation around ACEs, we know that trauma left unaddressed as a young person will inevitably lead to a higher probability of mental illness and physical illness. And we're talking about things like substance abuse, domestic violence, divorce, incarceration of a parent, death of a loved one. When you look at intergenerational trauma and the work that we're now doing on the other side of it, if we know that we are someone who identifies with an ACEs score somewhere between 1 and 8, this is about saying, now we can name it and we can build skills and tools to be able to say, here's how I can show up differently. Here's how I can be working to break that cycle. And knowing that through therapy, through psychiatry services, through our Rape Crisis Center, and just absolutely sitting around and doing what we're doing and naming it for what it is, that's the way that it started to show up a little bit differently for our agency.
And your agency is actually bringing in an expert.
Absolutely. I'm so excited that we will be having Dr. Marielle Bouquet coming on October 29th to the Todd Performing Arts Center at Chesapeake College. And Dr. Bouquet wrote a book called Break the Cycle: Healing Intergenerational Trauma. And it really is all about, okay, now that we know that this exists within our family system, how do we address it? How do we build skills and tools? She's going to come and train not only our staff throughout the day, but do a community-wide presentation. She'll do a 45-minute expert talk out to the community. She and I will sit very similarly to the way that you and I are sitting now. We'll do a Q&A and open up the question and answer period for the audience. And she'll also do a book signing. And it's really, we have so much trauma within our communities, and there's so many times where we're seeing trauma in the news, we're hearing about trauma, and so this is really an opportunity to talk about it a little bit differently.
And can you deal with it even if, say, the generation above you does not deal with it or does not want to talk about it?
Yeah, so that's the cycle breaker, right? I mean, you and I might be sitting here and saying, okay, we're going to break the cycle within our family. It doesn't mean those conversations are easy. It doesn't mean that maybe the generation above us wants to deal with it in the same way, but we can make a conscious decision to say, I want it to be different. I want to show up differently. I want my children to learn something differently. I want to lean into conversation and addressing traumas versus just pretending they didn't happen or making it be a conversation that's difficult to have. And that's the cycle breaker. And so that will be something that Dr. Bouquet will address as well, because there is risk when we do anything that breaks the cycle within our family system. But we really feel it's important for this conversation to be happening so our young people have an opportunity to make the choice of how they're going to show up based on how the family system works.
All right, for those who want to attend the event, what do they do?
So they can just go right onto our website, forallseasonsinc.org. You can also go onto our Facebook page, For All Seasons Behavioral Health and RCC. We have an Eventbrite registration. It would be wonderful if folks register ahead of time. If someone wants to be a part of it but can't be in person, we will also be live streaming that night through Facebook and YouTube. So certainly give our office a call at 410-822-1018 and we can fill you in with more information.
Sounds like a very interesting subject. Thank you so much.
Thank
Beth
you.
Ann Dorman, President and CEO for All Seasons. Thank you.